Hello all and welcome back to our channel once again. Today we are doing a whiskey glass comparison. Okay, so on the different whiskey glasses that you can see right in front of me here. As our whiskey expert Chris Walster right here is the best in this field, I shall now hand over to him who's going to lead today's session. Chris, over to you.
Okay, well there's one glass I've forgotten, which is the shot glass, which people will be aware of, and that really is for, if you like, Jack Daniels or something like that, so we won't go down that route. So what I thought was, this is your typical crystal glass for having a whiskey and soda, and this goes back to the 60s and 70s. It doesn't actually have much except for volume in it, so you could change that to a highball glass. And the only comment I'd actually make about crystal, it does feel nice in the hand and it looks good.
It does look a really nice glass, to be fair, I will admit.
Now the second one is probably the world's most famous whiskey glass. That's its shape side on. Vertically, you've got a nice solid base. You'll notice there's room to pour your whiskey, then the neck narrows and it broadens slightly at the top. This is known as a Glencairn. There's various variations of Glencairn, and it is really quite good. The idea is you pour in the whiskey, your hand keeps out the way because your hand can add oils that can flavour the whiskey. You nose, and this tulip shape allows any aromas, esters, alcohol to concentrate, so you really get a feel for it. And most people will drink, and to be fair, most people probably quite like gripping it like that, so it's very comfortable in the hand. This is what they call a Copita glass, and you'll notice it's got a stem and otherwise a tulip shape. Now, a lot of whiskey blenders and tasters use variations of Copita glasses because they hold it so the hands are well out the way. There's nothing going, oh, I should have washed my hands, or if I've washed my hands, oh, I smell soap. So that stops that affecting the whiskey, its flavours. So a lot of tasters will use that. And one of the things you can do with most of these glasses, and this is the example here, is you can put a lid on them.
Oh, that's interesting to see, that is.
Yeah. Now, what that lid is supposed to do is it concentrates and holds everything that's coming off the whiskey. As it warms up in the room, as a bit of air gets in, all these nice flavour compounds and stuff, it traps it below there. So when you come to drink it, you remove the lid and you get a wonderful bouquet of the whiskey. Now, to me, the only problem with a lid is if you're drinking cask strength whiskey, and I'd say anything above 50%, cask strength starts at 46%, but anything above 50%, particularly if you get into the high end at 60%, if you imagine you've just concentrated 60% alcohol in there, you're going to get what they call nose prickle. Ooh. In other words, it burns your nose, and then you can't smell anything. So I tend to use this for lower strength whiskies, so your standard 40%, and yeah, that helps improve things. Now this kind of weird shape, you've got a base, a bulb, and then a open top. This is manufactured by a company called NEAT. It's a relatively cheap glass in the sense that it's only £6 or £7 from the shops. And this is an interesting one. I'm not really sure quite where you would hold it. I tend probably to hold it like that. But the idea is you put your whiskey in the bottom, it concentrates to there, and then it broadens out. Now, that's not a bad idea, and I'll come back to this. This is a Norlan glass. This, if you enjoy tasting your whiskey, is the glass to have for whisky tasting. It's not really for drinking. It has a very thick rim, so it kind of feels funny when you, oh, I'm going to spill round it. Exactly how you hold it, it's kind of, yeah, it fits like that quite nicely, but in one hand, it's kind of weird. But this is very interesting, this glass, because it's actually, I don't know whether the camera will pick up, but it's actually got a vacuum between the inner and the outer. And the idea behind that is that your hand doesn't overheat the whisky. Whisky should be at 18 to 22 degrees centigrade. That's the ideal for Scotch whisky. Okay. If you can see the innards, you'll see basically we've got a tulip design. So whisky in at the bottom, concentrates the aromas and then sends them out. Now the other thing this has, which will almost certainly not show up on the camera, but you've got ridged areas down the bottom, and this is supposed to help move the whisky around so things interact and things just get greater. And I like this glass because I can actually distinguish an awful lot more flavours, and part of that success might be, because I love my cask strength whisky, it actually dissipates the alcohol somewhat, so you get no nose prickle, so your nose actually works. Now, that's kind of expensive. Off the top of my head, I think that's £21-25 a glass, so it's not the cheapest. This one by NEAT, as I say, is 6 or 7. Now, interestingly, this design probably does 90% of the Norlan.
Oh, okay.
So you could pay a lot more, and there is a definite difference. You will notice the difference between the two glasses, but £6 or £7 depends on what you're wanting to do. But that is the real tasting glass, to my mind. Doesn't mean I'm right. Bear in mind, Luke, I did say if I was a master blender or master distiller, that's the type of glass I would use. It's almost certainly going to be some form of Copita glass, because it definitely keeps your hands out of the way, whereas these two don't. So that's 5, and if we include the shot glass, 6 different whisky glasses, all of which are slightly different. In fact, if you pour the whisky into these glasses, each one of them, the whisky would taste and smell, i.e. the nose, the palate, slightly different, okay? And that would occur to everyone. Anyone, you put it in a different glass, it will change. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do a whisky tasting. Just not tasting the whisky, but just show you how you could use these glasses for to develop your understanding of whisky. What we're going to do is we're going to use these two, because what I want Luke to do, we're going to use the same whisky and just see if Luke can pick up the difference. Because if he doesn't, then you know the £7 glass is the one to buy, not the 20 plus. Although I do prefer that. But anyway, that's where we're at. So let's try. And we've got a few whiskies at the back here. And what I'm going to do is we're going to sample a Glenturret European Oak expression.
Ooh.
It's a 5-year-old. Being European Oak, you know it's going to be sweet, it's going to be spice. That's kind of the basics of it. And it's also a reasonably cheap whisky. It's not bad to have as your nightly sip at the price it is. So we're going to try this and see what happens.
You already get the smell coming off straight away. That's amazing.
Oh, I don't actually know which one has more whiskey, but they're both about the same level, so that's it. So basically, we'll start with this one. So you look at a whiskey, you want to look at the colour, you want to give it a bit of a swirl around in the glass so it mixes, gets aerated. I started in whiskey partly because it was so much simpler than wine. You had 10-year-olds, 18-year-olds, 25-year-old whiskies, and the price went up, and the quality in theory went up, and you stuck it in the back of a cupboard until you were ready to drink it, and once you'd opened it, you can keep it going for 6 months. I've actually had this bottle I've just used here, it's been open for 6 months now, and I think it's improved in that time. Oh, that is gorgeous. I get no alcohol prickle, and that is, I think, 46%.
Wow.
So absolutely no alcohol prickle off that at all. It's beautiful. I'm getting sherry, I'm getting sweetness, I'm getting berries, I'm getting fruits. Oh, gosh. Forgetting that I really should be just taking my time with this. Just make sure it's right. One thing you can do, remember I said about heating, the whiskey should be between 18 and 22 degrees centigrade. If it feels cold in your glass, just cup the glass in your hand for a few seconds. When that feels warm, the whiskey will be warm as well. It will be where it should be as a temperature. You can overheat it. You can see on this glass I'm actually quite close to the rim, so if I've got dirty hands for whatever reason, I might affect the whiskey. So not ideal, but then, heck, we're only here to drink. We're not here to lecture, are we? Oh, that's improved already. Now, what I will do is see if I can detect any difference. That is much subtler. It's not as strong or intense at all. In fact, interestingly, I'll wait and see. Luke, if you would like to try that first and that second.
Let's have an aroma. Ooh, quite a heavy glass, that's one thing I will say. I completely agree about the berries and all that. Very sweet. Sherried and stuff like that, you know, kind of like a very warming whiskey, to be fair.
It's warming. It's cold today, so it's a nice whiskey to be trying.
Interesting. Yeah, that is interesting.
I'll try the Norlan and see what you think with that.
Oh, I tell you what, it's crazy. As soon as you pick that glass up on how light it is, it honestly makes me think it's like plastic or something.
Yeah,
you know.
It's one common problem they have. People think it's plastic. It's actually something borosilicate, something glass. It's actually quite technical glass.
See, that's interesting. I'm now getting more, more aromas of stuff like a bit of orange.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going a bit more like nutmeg and a little bit of cinnamon as well, So it's interesting how you lose the characteristics that you get out of that glass, which was more like berries, caramel, and now I feel like, it makes me think I'm about to drink a cold mulled wine, basically, which has got some cinnamon in.
Yeah. Now, that's the interesting thing. The alcohol disappears. I mean, that is way more intense. And then you go to this, that's, we just half the alcohol level. And you're right.
Yeah.
You get this greater differentiation. And one of the interesting things is I'm old and an ex-smoker, so my nose isn't actually that good. But one of the most interesting things is, and you might have realised that a lot of master blenders now are women, is women can actually differentiate more flavours than men can. I think with this glass, I might just about be on a par with a lady in being able to differentiate, because exactly like Luke was saying there, suddenly I'm getting things like cinnamon.
Yeah.
I'm getting the orange rather than this like mass. But that doesn't do a bad job.
No, it doesn't.
That definitely, in my head, is a lot better.
It's the same whiskey, but just you're getting a completely different, aroma, such to speak. You know?
No, it's to me, it's a lovely demonstration of how the glass can make the difference. If you ever do a tasting, we all think, okay, so we want to have a low alcohol to a high alcohol whiskey. We want to have a light whiskey to a heavy whiskey, unpeated to peated. But it'd be fun one day if you could actually do tastings with various glasses. Anyway, I'm going to try this because I can't hold on much longer without actually having a sip of whiskey. Okay, I've been drinking this out of a Glencairn because that's what I normally drink whiskey out of. I only use this glass when I want to kind of taste it and try and work out the nuances of what's in it. And I'm going to keep stum on that. I'm going to let Luke try that. And don't worry about sharing glasses. There's enough alcohol in here. It'll kill all known germs like Domestos does.
See, to me, that orange becomes more powering, and it's almost like, it is effectively, a bit like Christmas spice and stuff like that, really. Yeah. It's kind of like, if I had that with me right now, I'd happily have a mince pie to go with that.
That would go lovely with a mince pie, I agree with that.
There's definitely... It's warming. It's perfect. It's something that you'd have like on a winter and all that stuff. On a beautiful if it's a cold night, for example, you're sitting near the fire.
Sitting near the fire. Yeah. Try that and see what you think. That if you think that's the same.
See, to my mind now, that's gone more sharper.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll take that.
So it feels like you've gone from drinking something which is what you'd have at like the winter season. Now I'm drinking something which kind of makes me think of berries growing on trees. It's almost like that reminds me of summer. So it's interesting how, even though it's the same whiskey, which, we've seen on camera when it's been poured into the same two different glasses, but the characteristics of both have changed. And I think that's interesting to see that when you drink whiskey.
I absolutely agree, although I get the idea of sharpness. I sense this as a heavier whiskey.
Yeah.
More oilier whiskey. And slightly more spicy.
Yeah. I mean, if it was down to personal preference, if someone gave me these as a blind taste, I'd think they're both two different types of whiskies.
Oh yeah,
honestly.
It's a wonderful example, and I hadn't meant to pick something that actually demonstrated your whiskey glass actually can make a big difference as to how that whiskey can taste. And I never meant to demonstrate that. I just meant to demonstrate to some extent that there's a difference between a Glencairn, this neat glass in the way you nose it, but actually drinking it, totally different. What, though, do you think is the ideal glass, and what do you think is the effect of changing glass? We'd love to hear your comments. And on that note, thank you for listening. We'll be back with further whiskey adventures and learning for ourselves as much as for anybody else. Thank you.
So please remember to like and subscribe to the Cask Connoisseur. Thank you and cheers.
Cheers.